Christians are out here, they should be looking at these other immigrants as religious refugees. That's what you said, your own words.
They're actually Christian refugees. At our border, they are Christian refugees that y'all have been socialized to call illegals.
Then how come you lobbied for Kamala Harris, raised money for the Harris campaigns, a Democrat operative, when she said that she wanted staunch border policies? She literally went to Guatemala and said, "You're not allowed to come. Do not come."
I know she did. I'm not a Democrat, my friend. I'm not a Democrat. Her policies cause less harm than Trump's.
You happen to be a Democrat operative.
Her policies cause less harm than Trump's, my friend. And her policies were closer to the actual teachings of Christ.
What's up, everybody? Jackson here, and this Piers Morgan panel with John Fugelsang, Andrew Wilson, and Isabel Brown covers religion, gun policy, and refugee policy, all colliding in one intense exchange. Fugelsang challenges Andrew Wilson directly to name a single gospel teaching the MAGA movement actually fights for, chapter and verse, and doesn't get a clean answer. There's also a real, serious point raised about anti-Christian violence in Nigeria that deserves to be taken seriously on its own terms. I want to check the specific policy claims about refugee admissions and the Nigeria violence separately, because both matter and neither should get lost in the shouting. Stick with me, get that like in, get subscribed, because we take every serious claim here seriously. Now, let's get into it.
US Marine Thomas Jacob Sanford, and he had been pictured wearing a Trump t-shirt with the slogan "Make liberals cry again," which may be an indication that he wasn't anti-Trump. We just don't know, as things stand, what his motivation was for this. As so often with these kind of incidents, I always think it's prudent to take a beat and just try and see if more information comes out as to why he may have done this. But Trump has gone out there on the attack, as he often does, and said this is an attack on Christians. What do you feel?
Well, I mean, Trump is just following the trends. We remember what happened with Charlie Kirk when progressives tried to paint him as some right-wing graper. Turns out that was all complete and total lies. They were doing damage control. They tried to paint him out to be a right-winger, clear up until it became irrefutable that he was not anymore. And then they just changed the narrative again. So Trump is just following the trends. It is the case that Christians are persecuted in the United States, have been for a long time. And they're going to continue to be. That's kind of our cross to bear. We were told that was going to be the case, in fact. That's part of what being a Christian is. As to Trump following the trends and making the assumption, do I kind of agree that you should have caution on these things? I do, but I can completely understand why it would be that he would have that reaction.
John Fugelsang, Benny Johnson posted about this attack on the church in Michigan. If a mosque was shut up every month, it would be a crisis for Muslims. If a synagogue was shut up every month, it would be a crisis for Jews. If a temple was shut up every month, it would be a crisis for Hindus. Christians, this is happening to us. Christianity is under attack. It's time to get serious about it. What's your response to that?
I keep hoping that one of these preventable attacks will inspire our Christian friends on the right to want to make it a little bit harder for unstable white men to easily get weapons that are designed to kill lots of people really fast. I really hoped after the awful murder of Mr. Kirk that some of our friends on the right would agree that maybe it's far too easy for unstable 20-something males to get their hands on hardware and pop off and murder people at a political rally.
He was using an antique rifle, dude. He was using, hang on, he was using an antique rifle.
I know.
An antique bolt.
It was unsecured.
Legislation?
I didn't interrupt you once, my friend. I didn't interrupt you one time.
What legislation do you think would have even been passed that would have prevented
if his grandfather had been obliged to if his grandfather had been legally obliged to keep his gun secured at home, that shooting wouldn't have happened, and the Sandy Hook shooting would not have happened.
You can't even demonstrate that's true. For all you know, the kid has the safe code.
You're not letting me finish, and you've interrupted me twice now. Piers, the deal is right-wing Christianity in America has been suckered, and you're really going to... I'm going to answer Piers's question, my friend. I didn't interrupt you. Right-wing Christianity in America has been suckered for a very long time into aligning with power and authority instead of challenging it as Christ did. Donald Trump didn't get the love of evangelicals by promising to do a damn thing Jesus commanded of us. Right-wing Christianity does not fight for the things Jesus commanded and taught us to do. Right-wing Christianity fights for conservative Christian power over every level of society. They do not fight to welcome the stranger, as Christ commands in Matthew 25 and as God commands throughout the Old Testament. They do not fight for individuals and nations to care for the sick and the poor, as commanded by Christ in the judgment of nations. They fight for right-wing, conservative Christian power, and America is suffering from a gun plague where children are now killed by guns more than disease, more than they are killed by car accidents. And I keep praying this is exactly the sort of situation where a religion based on love and empathy will come to our rescue. And yet, our conservative Christian friends are locked in this mindset that somehow personal freedoms matter more than the lives of Americans.
Isabel, you've been pulling... hang on, let Andrew, I'll come back to you, but let Isabel react, because you've been pulling a lot of faces as you were listening to that.
Yeah, you know, Piers, I was on with you the day that Charlie was shot, actually. We were talking about the murder of Irina Zarutska on the train in Charlotte, and I was very baffled by what I was hearing then. Nothing could have prepared me for the slew of attack against anyone who is a conservative Christian in America the last 30 seconds. There is not a single gun law on the books that would have prevented Charlie Kirk from being assassinated at a gun-free zone on the campus of Utah Valley University. When we saw the manifesto published to YouTube about the shooter at the Annunciation Catholic School in Minneapolis, you saw a very specific, detailed attack that was specifically against Christian children and their families, really warping in a very twisted demonic sense the mass with engravings and diary entries saying, "This is my body." I mean, we were watching a very coordinated attack going back to the Nashville shooting and to many other attacks on churches across the country over the past few years, of which there have been more than 500 attacks on Catholic churches in the United States in the last 5 years or so. This is clearly a specific attack against Christianity in America, but let's pretend that it's not just about America for a second, because the truth is it's not. Christianity, by the numbers, is by far and large the most persecuted religion on the face of the planet today. In Nigeria, just a few days ago, more than 60 people were killed using hammers and machetes after attending mass at a Catholic church there in Nigeria. And I read a study the other day, feel free to fact check me on this, to any of the other panelists, that more Christians have been slaughtered in Nigeria for being Christian in the last few years than Palestinians have been killed in Gaza during the midst of the Israeli-Gaza war. But you don't see any protests happening in the United States about that today. So it's ridiculous to try to create a left versus right paradigm here, or some sort of attack against the Republican Party, when there very clearly is a manifestation of spiritual warfare and demonic satanic influence in our society trying to attack Jesus Christ in America today.
Andrew, I want to play a clip.
I'm not a Democrat.
I'm going to let Andrew respond here. Chris Hedge, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, said on the Secular Talk podcast that Charlie Kirk's assassination was being used to create a new martyr for the movement of Christian nationalism, which he said is a backdoor to American fascism. Let's take a look.
When fascism comes to America, it won't be with swastikas and jackboots, and it will be with the Christian cross and mass recitations of the Pledge of Allegiance. You really got a glimpse of that in the rally in Arizona or rally, whatever you want to call it, the memorial service for Kirk.
Now, Andrew, two questions for you. One is, what is your understanding of what Christian nationalism is? And as a Christian nationalist, are you concerned that it gets hijacked by people who may genuinely be white supremacists, fascists, and so on?
Well, not really. So the idea of Christian nationalism is just that Christians remain the culturally dominant force in the United States. That's it. That's the entire proposition. Everything else is an addition. So the gentleman over here, for instance, a quick question for you. Is Jesus Christ God?
I believe so, but I don't believe in imposing my opinions on others.
Okay, got you. So Jesus Christ is God. So all the religions are false?
No, I don't believe that at all. I believe in my house there are many mansions, and I believe God has many ways of the truth. I don't think I'm better than anyone, because Christ's movement is about humility. Christ's movement is not about public domination and power.
I just want to make sure I got this right. Are all other religions false?
I don't believe that at all, no. And I don't believe right-wing Christianity is true either. Right-wing Christianity does not...
Answer my question, dude.
MAGA
is Islam
does
true?
Not fight for the teachings of Christ.
Is Islam true?
Why?
Is Islam true?
Islam believes in the same God as Christians. Do you believe we should welcome the stranger as God and Christ command, or do you believe in Donald Trump?
Wait, they believe Jesus Christ is God?
It's not my religion. They believe Christ is a prophet.
So then it's
the Virgin
false.
Mary is mentioned more in the Holy Quran than she's mentioned in the Bible.
I'm going to walk you through the logic here. If Jesus Christ is God,
what are the Christ teachings that Trump fights for, my friend?
Then it is the case.
What are the gospel teachings your movement fights for?
Do you want me to answer
your
your
movement
questions, or do you
uses
want to keep
Christ as a
filibustering?
prop, and you legislate against his commands.
Stop filibustering.
Dude, you
so I can
interrupted
answer
me.
your question. So I was in the middle of it. I asked you a single question and was getting to the follow-up, and you go on these long diatribes.
You asked
Calm down,
two
listen to what I'm
questions.
saying.
You asked two questions, my friend.
Logically, if it's the case that Jesus Christ is God, and that is true, then Islam has to be false, and you have to proclaim that that is the case as a follower of Christ.
Yes, too bad the founding fathers didn't have that system in our country.
Well, the thing that's so funny is that you say that you're a progressive Catholic. You're worried about Christians in power. You say that Christians are out here. Oh, Andrew, Christians are out here. They should be looking at these other immigrants as religious refugees. That's what you said, your own words.
They're actually Christian refugees. At our border, they are Christian refugees that y'all have been socialized to call illegal.
Then how come you lobbied for Kamala Harris, raised money for the Harris campaigns, a Democrat operative, when she said that she wanted staunch border policies? She literally went to Guatemala and said, "You're not allowed to come. Do not come."
I know she did. I'm not a Democrat, my friend. I'm not a Democrat. Her policies cause less harm than Trump's.
You happen to be a Democrat operative.
Her policies cause less harm than Trump's, my friend. And her policies were closer to the actual teachings of Christ than Trump. Let me ask you
Then that would be the exact same logic that we would have.
May I respectfully ask you one question? Can I ask you one question?
You're such a hypocrite, by the way.
Will you please? May I please ask you one question now that you've asked me so many? And now that you've called me names, dude, hit the other cheek. I can take it. Call me more names. I want to ask you something. Please tell me one actual gospel commandment or teaching of Christ.
Complete fraud.
Please tell me one actual gospel. Please tell us all and the viewers watching one actual gospel commandment or teaching of Christ that the MAGA movement fights for. Not what conservative Christians like. Something Christ, who is a mascot to this movement, actually commanded of us. Chapter and verse if you can.
Sure.
Welcome the stranger. Individuals and nations take care of the poor. Stop executing people. Your movement.
Do you want me to answer?
Let him answer the question then.
Please do.
You want me to answer, or
Please
are you going to answer? So the truth of the matter is that if you're really as concerned with the poor as you claim, you would be all about the MAGA movement, who's trying to stop job-crushing immigration
of the poor
to the United States. I'm giving it to you. Calm down.
Christ commands us to welcome the stranger.
Calm down so I can answer your question, lunatic. I'm going to answer it precisely. Here's how it works. If it is the case that you make these bold claims like you do in your book, that Christians ought to be paying taxes for the poor so that we could, for the poor, we got to give it all to the poor. That's what your view is.
That's not my suggestion, bro. That's Jesus' suggestion.
Then it would be the case. Then it would be the case that you would not want these job-crushing waves of mass migration coming to the United States, which displace
one teaching of Jesus,
the poor.
Andrew. Just one.
They displace the poor.
Give me one teaching of Christ.
I just explained to you that
if
it's the case,
of Christ you fight for.
I just did. I just explained to you, if you really want to uplift the poor, you don't do it with crushing mass migration.
What Jesus teaching did you explain?
Let's start with the refugee cap figures, because they're specific and checkable. The claim that the annual refugee admission ceiling was set at 7,500 for the fiscal year, down from 125,000 the year before, a roughly 94% reduction, is the kind of precise government policy figure that's directly verifiable against official presidential determinations on refugee admissions, which are published annually. If accurate, that's a real, dramatic policy shift worth understanding on its own terms, and it's worth checking the current figures directly given how significantly refugee caps have shifted across recent administrations. The claim about prioritizing a specific group, white South African Afrikaners, for refugee admission while broader refugee processing remains suspended refers to a real, publicly reported policy action that made news when it was announced. And it's worth checking against the actual executive order or policy directive language directly rather than any single characterization of it, since the specific criteria and stated justification matter for understanding the full picture. Now on the Nigeria violence. This is a real, serious, and significantly underreported humanitarian crisis, specific documented attacks, including mass killings in Kaduna and Kogi states, and violence during religious services, have been reported by multiple international human rights and religious freedom monitoring organizations. It's worth checking the specific casualty figures cited here against organizations like Open Doors or International. Christian Concern directly, since exact figures in ongoing violence can vary between reporting sources, but the broader pattern of severe, sustained anti-Christian violence in parts of Nigeria is well documented and deserves to be taken seriously without being weaponized as a talking point or dismissed as exaggeration. On the comparison drawn between Christian deaths in Nigeria and Palestinian deaths in Gaza, I'd be cautious about this specific comparative framing, since these are different conflicts with different dynamics, casualty verification methods, and timescales, and using one tragedy's death toll to minimize attention to another doesn't actually serve either group being discussed. Both crises can be serious and worthy of attention without being placed in competition with each other for moral priority. On the core theological challenge Fugelsang posed, asking any political movement that invokes religious identity to identify specific concrete teachings it acts on rather than general cultural alignment is a fair and pointed test, applicable to any movement claiming religious grounding for its political program, regardless of which religion or which political direction. Andrew Wilson's response, defining Christian nationalism as maintaining Christian cultural dominance rather than pointing to a specific commandment, is worth taking at face value as his actual stated position, since he said it directly and didn't walk it back when pressed. Here's the tension worth sitting with plainly. The Nigeria crisis is real and deserves serious, sustained attention. The refugee policy figures, if accurate, represent a genuinely dramatic reduction in admissions, specifically during a period when documented religious persecution abroad, including of Christians, is severe. Both of those facts can be true simultaneously, and noting the tension between them isn't an attack on concern for persecuted Christians abroad. It's a fair question about whether stated priorities match actual policy outcomes. So tell me, do you think a movement invoking religious identity should be held to naming specific policy commitments tied to that religion's actual teachings, or is broader cultural alignment a fair enough standard on its own? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more of these breakdowns that take every serious claim seriously, get subscribed, because that's exactly what this channel is here for.